Welcome to your Exam Prep Power Hour. I am so incredibly pumped for this explainer, because honestly, we're taking something that usually totally stresses students out, Biology SPM Chapter 10, the transport system, and we are turning it into an unforgettable, super cute theme park ride. So instead of a dry, boring textbook review, we're going to explore your body's internal transport networks like they're different zones in a massive biological theme park. By the end of this tour, you're going to have all the core definitions, those essential concepts, and those tricky exam hotspots totally locked in. Let's do this.
Here is our exam prep roadmap for today. We've got 1. The circulatory highway, 2. The heartbeat ride, 3. Platelet paramedics, 4. Passport control, 5. The lymphatic lazy river, and we'll wrap it all up with 6. Your exam checklist.
Starting off in Zone 1, the circulatory highway, checking out arteries and veins.
Okay, ding! Major exam hotspot right off the bat. You absolutely must know the structural differences between your main highway routes here, the arteries and the veins. Arteries, they are built tough. They've got thick, elastic muscular walls because, well, they have to handle extremely high-pressure blood pumping rapidly straight from the heart. Veins, on the other hand, are kind of like the scenic route back. They have thinner walls, and the blood flow is much slower, running at a lower pressure. And because that pressure is so low, veins have these special built-in doors called valves. Those are absolutely crucial to prevent the blood from just flowing backward due to gravity.
Now, in the absolute heat of an exam, it is so easy to panic and mix up which one does what. So here is your first memory mnemonic of the day. Ready? Arteries shoot away, veins visit the heart today. A for arteries, A for away from the heart. V for veins, V for visiting the heart. Say it to yourself a few times, and I promise you will never, ever forget their direction of travel.
What's really fascinating, though, is looking at what actually powers this massive highway. Your heartbeat doesn't just happen randomly. It's initiated by this specific little cluster of tissue in the right atrium called the sinoatrial node, or SAN. Think of this SAN as the ultimate pacemaker. It fires off electrical impulses that spread right across the atria. Then those impulses hit the atrioventricular node, or AVN, which actually delays the signal for just a tiny fraction of a second before sending it down to the ventricles. That perfectly timed 1-2 punch, that's what pumps your blood so effectively.
Moving into Zone 2, the heartbeat ride and the lub-dub magic.
You are definitely going to see this word on your test, so let's just lock it in right now. The heart is myogenic. But what does that actually mean? Well, it just means our cardiac muscle is this independent little worker that contracts and relaxes rhythmically completely by itself. It doesn't need any nervous stimulation or frantic signals from the brain telling it to beat. Nope, the heart is its own boss, generating its own rhythm entirely thanks to that SAN pacemaker we just talked about.
So the crucial point for the exam is knowing where the actual sound of the heartbeat comes from. It's actually not the muscles squeezing. It's the sound of the valves physically snapping shut. So memorize this cute little chant. Tri-bi-lub, semi-dub. When the tricuspid and bicuspid valves close during ventricular contraction, they make the louder first lub sound. Then, when the ventricles relax, the semilunar valves snap shut to prevent backflow, giving us that softer dub sound. Tri-bi-lub, semi-dub. Just sing it in your head, and you'll ace that question for sure.
On to Zone 3, the platelet paramedics and the clotting cascade.
Okay, this 4-step clotting cascade is heavily tested, and you need to know the sequence perfectly. Picture this: a blood vessel gets damaged. Immediately, our little paramedic platelets rush to the scene and clump together. They release an enzyme complex called thrombokinase. This acts as a catalyst, instantly converting an inactive plasma protein called prothrombin into its active form, thrombin. Finally, that thrombin catalyzes the conversion of soluble fibrinogen into an insoluble, incredibly tough fibrin mesh. It literally acts like a biological net, trapping red blood cells and sealing the wound shut.
I know, that is a whole lot of big T and P words, right? Don't worry, just use our PTVC mnemonic to remember the exact ingredients needed to make this whole cascade happen. P for platelets releasing T for thrombokinase, plus V for vitamin K, and C for calcium ions. Without vitamin K and calcium ions present in the blood plasma, thrombokinase literally cannot convert prothrombin into thrombin, and the whole paramedic rescue mission fails. Just remember, PTVC.
Now, this entire process really highlights why blood clotting needs to be so perfectly controlled, because sometimes the paramedics get a little confused and they form a clot inside an unbroken, completely healthy blood vessel. This creates a really dangerous traffic jam called thrombosis. A super common example is deep vein thrombosis, or DVT. This often happens in the legs when someone sits totally immobile for a really long time, like on a super long flight, causing the blood flow to drastically slow down and pool.
But honestly, it gets even more dangerous. If that stationary clot, the thrombus, actually breaks off and goes rogue, traveling freely through the bloodstream, it gets a new name. It's called an embolus. And mark this down, this is a major exam definition. An embolus is basically a moving roadblock. It'll keep traveling until it inevitably gets wedged in a smaller blood vessel, completely blocking the flow. If it blocks an artery in the brain, that's a stroke. If it blocks a coronary artery in the heart, that causes a heart attack.
All right, let's head over to Zone 4, Passport Control, covering blood groups and rhesus.
Knowing your blood groups is an absolute lifesaver for your exam review. See, your blood type is determined by specific antigens that basically act like tiny ID cards on the surface of your red blood cells. Blood group A has antigen A, B has B, AB has both, and O has 0 antigens. Because group O has no antigens on the surface to trigger any sort of alarm, it is the generous, universal donor. Conversely, group AB has no antibodies in its blood plasma to attack any incoming blood, making individuals with AB blood the universal recipients.
But what happens if the blood doesn't pass passport control? Well, if you give someone the wrong blood type, you get a massive biological traffic pileup called agglutination. This is when incompatible antigens and antibodies mix, like antigen A meeting anti-A antibodies. They literally lock together, causing the red blood cells to heavily clump up and coagulate. This can be completely fatal, which is exactly why blood typing is so critically important before doing any kind of transfusion.
Ding, ding, another exam hotspot. Besides the A, B, and O, we also have the rhesus factor, which is just another antigen on the red blood cell. You need to pay very close attention to the specific scenario of an Rh-negative mother who is pregnant with an Rh-positive baby. During the first pregnancy, a little of the baby's Rh-positive blood might leak into the mother's system during birth. Her body will then manufacture anti-D antibodies. The real danger here is the second pregnancy. If the second baby is also Rh-positive, those antibodies the mother made can actually cross the placenta and attack the fetus's red blood cells. This causes a highly dangerous condition called erythroblastosis fetalis.
Time to relax a bit at Zone 5, the lymphatic lazy river.
So at the arterial end of your blood capillaries, high pressure actually forces fluid out into the microscopic spaces between your cells. This creates tissue fluid that beautifully bathes your cells in nutrients. But here's the catch. While 85% of that tissue fluid re-enters the blood capillaries at the venous end, 15% gets left behind. If it just stayed there, we'd swell up like giant water balloons. So instead, this remaining 15% diffuses into our tiny, blind-ended lymphatic capillaries to become a fluid called lymph. It just drifts down our lymphatic lazy river to eventually be returned safely to the blood.
Comparing these three fluids is another massive core concept. You absolutely must know the difference between them. Blood has everything. Tissue fluid is basically just blood plasma minus the massive proteins, red blood cells, and platelets. They are literally just too big to squeeze out of the capillary walls. Therefore, lymph is pretty much exactly like tissue fluid, completely missing the red blood cells and platelets. But it uniquely has a very high concentration of fat absorbed from the intestines and tons of white blood cells called lymphocytes.
Let's see how this all builds together into a full system. As the lymph flows gently upward, powered mainly by muscle contractions, it passes through lymph nodes. These are located in areas like your neck, armpits, and groin. You can think of these lymph nodes as cute little, highly armed security guards. They are packed with lymphocytes that actively filter the fluid, destroying bacteria and pathogens. Once the fluid is fully cleaned and cleared, it gets dumped right back into the circulatory system via the right and left subclavian veins near your collarbones.
But what happens if this lazy river gets blocked up? If the fluid fails to return to the circulatory system and just accumulates in the intercellular spaces, it causes severe swelling called edema. Now, this can happen for several normal reasons, like pregnancy or prolonged bed rest. But in severe cases, it can actually be caused by a parasitic thread-like worm transmitted by mosquitoes. The worm literally clogs up the lymphatic vessels. This results in an extreme chronic form of edema known as elephantiasis, which is characterized by massive swelling of the legs.
Let's wrap this up with Section 6, the exam checklist.
Incredible job! We've successfully survived the entire biological theme park. So here's your ultimate cheat sheet. Check yourself. You need to confidently explain the SAN and avian pacemakers generating the heartbeat. You need to know that the closing of the valves makes the tri-bi-lub, semi-dub sounds. You must master the four-step clotting cascade using our PTVC mnemonic. You have to understand agglutination at passport control and the specific dangers of the rhesus factor in pregnancy. And finally, know the exact composition differences between blood, tissue fluid, and lymph. If you can explain these 5 key concepts to a friend, you are officially ready to ace Chapter 10. So I'll leave you with this final thought to ponder as you hit the books. If you had to invent a brand new medical drug to stop deep vein thrombosis without causing excessive bleeding, which specific step of that clotting cascade would you target? Think about it and happy studying.